Sarah stood quietly in the corner of the grand ballroom, her 9-year-old son Noah gripping her hand tightly. The room buzzed with celebration, guests laughed over champagne flutes, waiters weaved through tables with silver trays, and the smell of roasted duck and buttered rolls filled the air. It was her brother Liam's wedding day, and everything looked perfect on the outside. But inside, Sarah felt like she didn't belong. She had tried her best to blend in. Her dress, though simple and a bit outdated, was clean and pressed. She had styled her hair the way she used to before life had gotten so hectic. Noah wore a little blazer that didn't quite fit his growing frame, but his smile more than made up for it. Sarah told herself that they were enough, even if they didn't have the luxury or polish that her family expected. The ceremony had passed without issue. Liam had looked handsome in his tuxedo, and Emily, his new bride, had looked radiant in a shimmering gown that probably cost more than Sarah's car. As they exchanged vows, Sarah felt a tiny pang in her chest. Not from jealousy, but from the aching reminder of everything she had once dreamed of, and everything that had slipped through her fingers. Now, during the reception, the MC tapped the mic and announced it was time for the bride's speech. The guests quieted. Emily rose with a champagne flute in hand and an overly bright smile plastered on her face. "I'd like to thank everyone for being here today," she began, her voice sweet and controlled. "Especially Liam's family. Janice, thank you for raising such a wonderful son." Sarah clapped politely. "So far, so good. And of course," Emily continued, "Liam's sister Sarah is here as well. With her adorable little boy." She glanced in Sarah's direction, her eyes sparkling with something colder than kindness. "It's so sweet that you made time for us. I know how hard it can be for single moms to juggle things." There was an uncomfortable pause. A few people chuckled. Sarah froze. Emily wasn't done. "I mean, truly, it's inspiring," she added with an exaggerated sincerity. "Raising a child alone, living modestly. I think it takes a lot of courage to show up somewhere like this when you don't quite fit in." Now the laughter was louder. It wasn't cruel from everyone, but it was enough. Enough to make Sarah's ears burn. Enough to make Noah shrink closer to her side. Then came the final blow. Janice, her own mother, chimed in from the head table. "That's our Sarah," she said with a laugh. "Always showing up like a clearance item at a luxury store." More laughter erupted. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Liam, sitting beside Emily, said nothing. He didn't laugh, but he didn't stop it either. His eyes met Sarah's for the briefest moment, but he quickly looked away. That was worse than any joke. Sarah's stomach twisted. She felt like she had been slapped in front of 100 people. Her cheeks burned with shame, and yet she couldn't move. Her feet were frozen to the floor, her heart pounding against her ribs. She glanced down at Noah, who was now looking up at her, confused and concerned. "Mom," he whispered. "Why are they laughing?" Sarah forced a smile. "It's okay, sweetie. It's just grown-up stuff." But it wasn't okay. None of it was okay. Sarah had grown used to the subtle digs from her family. Janice had always favored Liam, praising him for every achievement and excusing every mistake. When Sarah's marriage had fallen apart years ago and her husband had left without warning, Janice had offered no support, only criticism. "You must have done something wrong," she had said. "Men don't just leave unless they have a reason." From then on, Sarah had been the family disappointment. The burden. The poor single mom. She hadn't expected warmth today, but she hadn't expected cruelty either. As Emily continued her speech, switching topics to thank her bridesmaids and gush about her honeymoon plans, Sarah stood still, tears welling in her eyes. The music swelled in the background, and the clinking of glasses returned, but something inside her had gone quiet, like a flame snuffed out. She looked around the room, wondering if anyone had noticed how deeply the comments had cut. A few sympathetic eyes glanced her way, but no one said anything. No one stood up for her. Not her mother. Not her brother. She had never felt more alone. Noah tugged on her hand. "Do you want to go home, Mom?" She hesitated. Part of her wanted to run, to grab her son and disappear from this nightmare. But another part of her, a part that had been through far worse, whispered, "Stand tall. Don't let them see you break." She knelt down to Noah's level, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "No," she said gently. "We're going to finish our dinner, and then we'll go home." "But they're being mean," Noah said. "You didn't do anything wrong." Her throat tightened. "I know," she whispered. "I know, baby. But sometimes people say hurtful things when they don't understand." He nodded slowly. I understand you. You're the best mom. That, right there, was everything. Sarah stood up, lifted her chin, and walked Noah over to their table with quiet grace. The laughter had died down. The moment had passed. But Sarah would never forget it. She had come to the wedding to support her brother. She had hoped for a little dignity. What she got instead was public humiliation, a reminder that in her family's eyes, she was nothing more than a stain on their perfect image. But she wasn't broken. Not yet. As she sat down and poured Noah a glass of juice, she reminded herself of something important: her worth was not determined by their opinions. She had survived heartbreak, abandonment, and judgment. She had built a life for herself and her son from the ground up. And that strength, quiet, invisible, and unwavering, was something no cruel joke could ever take away. The car ride home was quiet. Sarah kept her eyes fixed on the road, the glow of the streetlights flashing rhythmically across the windshield as she drove through the quiet suburbs. Noah sat in the back seat, his head resting against the window, already halfway to sleep. His little blazer was rumpled, and his shoes were kicked off, one tucked beneath the seat and the other forgotten somewhere near the door. The silence between them was heavy, but peaceful. For Noah, the night was ending. For Sarah, it was only beginning. Her hands tightened on the steering wheel. The words from the wedding replayed in her mind like a cruel melody. Single moms are so brave. A clearance item at a luxury store. The laughter. The looks. Her mother's voice cutting through the room like a blade. And Liam, her own brother, sitting there, saying nothing. She blinked back tears. She didn't want to cry. Not now. Not in front of Noah. He had already seen too much tonight, the way people had looked at her, the way the atmosphere shifted when Emily started her speech. He didn't understand all the nuances, but children are perceptive. And Sarah had always promised herself she'd never let him feel her pain as his own. She parked the car in front of their modest townhouse, a small but warm space they had called home for 5 years now. The porch light flickered a little, something she'd meant to fix. Inside, the furniture was mismatched and second-hand, but it was clean, and it was theirs. Every corner of it had been built with sacrifice and love. After tucking Noah into bed, she stood for a long while in his doorway, watching the rise and fall of his chest as he slept. His brow was slightly furrowed, like he was still holding on to some of the confusion from earlier. She smoothed his hair back with a trembling hand. "You don't deserve this world's cruelty," she whispered. In the quiet of the living room, Sarah finally allowed herself to feel the weight of the night. She sank into the couch and stared at nothing. She didn't sob. She didn't scream. Her pain was silent, the kind that sits heavy in the bones, that ages the soul in unseen ways. It was the pain of being constantly overlooked, never defended, always expected to endure without complaint. She thought of Liam. When they were children, they had been inseparable. Playing in the backyard, building pillow forts in the living room, staying up late whispering secrets and stories. He had always looked out for her. Older by only 2 years, but fiercely protective, especially when their parents fought or when the world seemed too big. But something had changed the moment Emily entered his life. At first, Sarah had tried to welcome her. She had even helped Liam plan their first anniversary surprise. But Emily had looked at her with those judgmental eyes, scanning Sarah from head to toe like she was measuring her value based on clothes, income, and the absence of a wedding ring. It didn't take long before the subtle comments began. Phrases like, "Some people just make poor life choices," or "Not everyone can keep a husband." Emily never said these things directly to Sarah, but always loud enough to be heard. What hurt more, though, was how Liam let it happen. How he began to agree with the silence. The bond they'd once shared frayed thread by thread, until it felt like she was clinging to a memory that meant nothing to him anymore. And then there was Janice. Her mother had never hidden her favoritism. Liam was the golden child, the son who could do no wrong. He got the best opportunities, the most praise, the warmest hugs. Sarah had learned early on that affection from her mother came with conditions. When she married young, Janice had warned her it was a mistake. When the marriage failed, she had said, "I told you so." Not with sympathy, but with smugness. As if her daughter's pain validated her own pride. Tonight had only confirmed what Sarah had long feared: she didn't have a place in her own family anymore. But even through the ache, she clung to her dignity. Sarah had never begged for their love. She had never allowed bitterness to harden her heart. She chose every day to rise, to work, to parent with love and strength. Her life might not be glamorous, but it was honest. Her son was growing into a kind, thoughtful boy. Her home, the humble, was filled with warmth. She had built this life on her own. Outside, rain began to patter softly against the window pane. Sarah pulled the thin throw blanket over her lap, trying to quiet her mind, but the questions echoed still. Why didn't Liam defend me? Why did my mother laugh? Why am I always the one left to swallow the pain? She didn't have the answers. But she did know this: the pain she felt tonight wouldn't break her. It had tried before, when her ex walked out, when the bills piled up, when she held Noah through nights of fever and fear alone. And yet, every time, she had stood back up. With her heart still aching and the sting of humiliation lingering like a bruise, Sarah rose from the couch and walked to her bedroom. She paused at Noah's room again, peeking in one last time. He was snoring softly now, completely unaware of the quiet storm still raging in his mother's chest. "Good night, baby," she whispered. "I've got you." She climbed into bed and stared at the ceiling. Her eyes didn't close right away. But her heart, though bruised, beat with steady purpose. She would wake up tomorrow and make breakfast. She would iron Noah's school uniform. She would go to work. She would keep going, not because they deserved her strength, but because her son did. Because she did. The air was thick with laughter. Bitter and cruel. Sarah sat frozen in her seat at the reception hall, her fingers clenched tightly in her lap. The words from Emily's speech had landed like slaps across her face, each one echoing louder than the last. Single moms are just so brave. Like shopping in the clearance section and pretending it's luxury. The crowd had erupted. Glasses clanked, guests chuckled behind their hands, and Sarah could feel the heat crawling up her neck. Her heart pounded, not from shame, but from the sting of being humiliated in front of strangers, family, and her own child. Her eyes flicked down to Noah, who sat beside her in his little suit, legs swinging just above the floor. His brow was furrowed. He wasn't laughing. His small fists were clenched on the table, just like hers. More laughter followed, and then Janice, Sarah's own mother, chimed in. "She's like a charity case, isn't she? Always surviving, never thriving." Another round of snickers. Sarah could barely breathe. She turned slightly toward Noah, ready to lean down and reassure him, to brush it off like she always did. But before she could say a word, he pushed his chair back with a screech. Then, he stood. The noise caught people's attention. Forks paused midair, and heads turned. A few guests chuckled at first, thinking it was a child's silly interruption. But then Noah stepped forward, away from the table, and raised his voice. "Stop laughing at my mom." Silence. Every sound in the room vanished. Emily, standing proudly near the mic, blinked in confusion. Janice sat frozen, her champagne flute halfway to her lips. Noah stood tall, or as tall as a 9-year-old could. His chin was up, his cheeks flushed pink, and his eyes were burning with determination. "My mom is not a joke," he said, voice loud and clear. "She's the strongest person I know. She works hard every day. She tucks me in every night. She gives me the best hugs. She makes pancakes in funny shapes even when she's tired." A murmur rippled through the crowd, but no one interrupted. "She helped me when I was scared during a storm. She came to my school play even though she had to leave work early. She smiles even when she's sad. And she never says anything mean about anyone. Not even you." He looked straight at Emily. Then at Janice. Then at Liam. "You should all be ashamed." Emily's face went pale. Janice looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. Liam stared at his nephew, completely speechless. Noah turned back to his mom and walked toward her slowly. Sarah hadn't moved. Her heart felt like it was going to break, not from pain this time, but from the overwhelming surge of love and pride welling inside her. He climbed up onto her chair, standing beside her, and put one arm around her shoulder. "I love my mom," he said softly, but everyone heard it. "She's not less. She's more. She's everything." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Not from humiliation. Not from hurt. But from the pure, unfiltered love of a child who had just given her something more powerful than any apology. He had seen her. He had defended her. For a few long seconds, no one spoke. The crowd sat in stunned silence, some blinking awkwardly, others shifting in their seats with guilt. Emily stepped away from the microphone, her confident smirk gone. Janice stared down at her plate. And Liam, finally, looked at his sister, his face full of something that looked like regret. Sarah rose slowly, placing a hand gently on Noah's back. "Thank you," she whispered. Noah turned and hugged her tightly around the waist. "You're the best mom ever," he said into her dress. And in that moment, everything else faded. The judgment. The whispers. The coldness of family. None of it mattered. What mattered was that her son had stood for her when no one else did. Sarah held Noah close as they walked back to their table. Some guests gave small, awkward claps. A few avoided eye contact. But Sarah held her head high. For the first time in years, she felt seen. As the reception resumed, the music felt quieter, the laughter more subdued. Emily made no more jokes. Janice kept to herself. And Liam. Liam glanced over more than once, but said nothing. Sarah didn't need his words anymore. She had Noah's. Later that night, after they returned home, Sarah knelt beside her son's bed. He was curled under his blankets, eyes heavy with sleep. "Noah," she whispered, brushing his hair back. "Why did you do that?" He blinked up at her, confused. "Because they were wrong. You're amazing, Mommy." Sarah smiled through the tears that threatened again. "Thank you, baby." He reached out and took her hand, squeezing it tightly. "You always protect me," he mumbled. Tonight, it was my turn. She stayed by his side until he drifted off. And as she sat in the quiet of his room, she realized something. She had always feared that her son might grow up feeling like he was missing something, that not having a traditional family might somehow hurt him. But tonight, he had shown her the truth. He wasn't missing anything. He had everything he needed. And so did she. The wedding reception wasn't the same after Noah's brave stand. A hush had lingered in the air, thick and awkward, long after the boy returned to his seat beside Sarah. The laughter had died down. The clinking of glasses, the chatter, even the music felt subdued, like someone had dimmed the lights on a once celebratory evening. Sarah sat quietly, one hand resting on Noah's shoulder. He was eating his slice of cake like nothing had happened, completely unaware of the emotional aftershocks he had set off in the room. But Sarah saw it all, the way people glanced at her now, not with ridicule, but with something that resembled shame. An older woman, one of Janice's friends, approached first. Her heels clicked hesitantly on the tile floor, and she clutched her clutch bag like it was a shield. "I just wanted to say," she began, eyes darting nervously, "your son is remarkable. You must be very proud." Sarah offered a small, surprised smile. "Thank you," she said gently. "I'm sorry, by the way," the woman added in a hushed tone. "For laughing. I didn't realize how cruel it sounded until he spoke up." Sarah nodded slowly. "It's okay. Thank you for saying that." The woman gave her a sad smile before hurrying back to her table. Others followed. A younger couple, then a nod from Janice's side, then a few guests Sarah didn't even know by name. One by one, they came, not in a dramatic show, but with quiet, awkward admissions of guilt. "I'm sorry. Your son's got more guts than half the people in here. You didn't deserve that." Each apology was unexpected. Each one made Sarah feel a little less alone. But not everyone felt the same. Emily, standing near the head table with her makeup slightly smudged and her smile stiff, tried to recover the night with forced laughter. "Kids say the darndest things, right?" she quipped loudly. "So dramatic. He should be on stage." No one laughed. Liam stood beside her, his expression unreadable. His posture was stiff, arms crossed as he stared into the crowd. A few guests looked his way, expecting him to say something, anything, but he remained silent. Sarah glanced at him. For a brief second, their eyes met across the room. She had known him all her life, knew the tilt of his jaw when he was conflicted, the way he bit the inside of his cheek when he was torn. And he was torn now. Between the sister who had raised him like a second mother, and the new wife who clearly resented her. He didn't come over. He didn't apologize. But his silence spoke volumes. At the center of it all sat Janice. Regal and composed as ever, Janice sat with perfect posture at her table, sipping champagne like nothing had happened. She hadn't approached Sarah. She hadn't acknowledged Noah's words. If anything, she looked mildly annoyed that the evening had shifted away from Emily's spotlight. Sarah watched her mother with a numb kind of detachment. There was no surprise anymore. No expectation of warmth or remorse. Janice had always picked sides, and Liam had always been her golden child. She glanced at her plate, then at her grandson. "You should teach him not to talk out of turn," she said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "Children shouldn't meddle in adult matters." Sarah's jaw clenched, but she didn't respond. Noah, however, heard it. He looked up from his cake and tilted his head. "She's not sorry, is she?" he whispered. Sarah shook her head gently. "No, sweetheart. Some people never are." They left shortly after. Sarah didn't want to linger where she wasn't welcome. A few guests waved them goodbye, a few more offered hugs or murmured apologies again. But the warmth was fleeting. The wedding had turned cold. As they walked to the car, the night air felt fresher than anything inside that hall. The stars were out, and the moon hung low and golden. Noah reached for Sarah's hand. "Did I do something wrong?" She stopped and knelt in front of him. "No," she said firmly, her hands cupping his face. "You did everything right. You stood up for someone you love. That takes real courage." He nodded slowly, then wrapped his arms around her neck. "I just didn't like how they talked about you." Sarah hugged him tightly. "Neither did I, but I'm okay now. Because you reminded me of who I am." In the days that followed, word of the wedding incident spread among family and friends. Some continued to express support. Others stayed silent. Sarah didn't chase anyone down for explanations. She had spent too long trying to please people who would never truly see her. Emily remained dismissive. On social media, she joked about wedding drama and emotional outbursts, pretending like it had all been blown out of proportion. Liam, for his part, sent a single text. "I'm sorry about what happened. I should have said something. I froze. I didn't expect Noah to say what he did. I'm proud of him, though. And of you." Sarah read it twice before placing the phone face down on the table. It was too little, too late. Janice never called. Never wrote. As if the whole evening had never happened. But Sarah had changed. She no longer felt the need to explain herself to people who were committed to misunderstanding her. For the first time in years, she felt something like peace, not because the pain was gone, but because she had chosen herself. Because Noah had chosen her, too. And that was enough. The days following the wedding felt like the slow unraveling of a thread that had held Sarah tied to a life she no longer wanted to be part of. There were no dramatic fights, no screaming matches or emotional confrontations. Instead, there was silence, quiet, cold, and revealing. Sarah didn't reach out to her family, and they didn't reach out to her. For once, she didn't chase after apologies or explanations. The silence, while painful, was liberating. It allowed her the clarity to finally ask herself a question she'd avoided for years: what if you stopped trying to belong somewhere you were never truly accepted? Noah was her North Star through it all. His courage at the wedding had not only protected her in the moment, but it had awakened something in her. Watching him stand up in front of a room full of adults and speak his truth had made Sarah realize just how much strength she had passed on to him, and just how much she had been underestimating her own. The following weekend, instead of calling Janice or Liam like she might have in the past, Sarah packed up a picnic bag, grabbed Noah's hand, and headed to a nearby lake. They sat on a blanket near the water, watching the ducks glide across the surface. It was a simple day, no tension, no judgment, no sideways glances. Just peace. "Do you miss Grandma or Uncle Liam?" Noah asked quietly as he nibbled on a peanut butter sandwich. Sarah took a moment before answering. "I miss the people I thought they were," she admitted. "But I don't miss feeling small around them. Or unloved." Noah nodded, as if he understood more than most 9-year-olds should. "You don't need them, right?" She smiled and brushed a crumb from his cheek. "No, honey. We don't need anyone who makes us feel like we're not enough." That moment marked the beginning of a shift, not just in Sarah's relationship with her family, but in how she saw herself. For the first time in years, she stopped defining herself by what she lacked: a husband, a perfect family, validation from her mother, and started focusing on what she had. And what she had was beautiful. Noah thrived. Without the weight of judgment or passive-aggressive family visits, their home became lighter. He laughed more, asked more questions, grew bolder in school projects, and even started drawing pictures of his team, a stick figure version of him and Sarah, standing side by side with capes. Sarah started making small but meaningful changes. She took a long overdue break from social media, where she'd often been subjected to Emily's curated perfection and Janice's thinly veiled posts about family loyalty. She cleared out old photos, old expectations, and the guilt that had hung like a shadow over her life for far too long. Instead, she poured energy into her passions. She signed up for a part-time writing course, something she had always wanted to do but never felt worthy of pursuing. She found a small community of single parents who met weekly for coffee and conversation, people who understood her life without needing it explained or defended. She no longer flinched at the word single mom. It no longer felt like a label of shame but a badge of resilience. One afternoon, while sitting at a cafe with her notebook, Sarah scribbled a line that would stay with her. Family isn't defined by shared blood, but by shared love. And that's what she built for herself and for Noah, a new family, made up of kindness, trust, laughter, and fierce loyalty. Over time, the people who had apologized at the wedding followed up. Some reached out with genuine efforts to reconnect, not out of obligation, but from understanding. Sarah didn't shut them out, but she also didn't let them back in easily. She had learned the difference between forgiveness and access. As for Liam, he texted occasionally. His words were always laced with guilt, never quite asking for forgiveness, but hinting at regret. I miss how things used to be. I should have done better that day. I hope Noah is doing okay. Sarah would respond with polite, measured replies. She bore him no hatred, but she had released the dream of the sibling bond she once clung to. Love without action had no place in her new life. Janice remained distant. Her silence was its own kind of message, a final confirmation that Sarah's worth in her eyes had always been conditional. And that was okay now. Letting go didn't hurt as much when you finally saw the truth. Months passed. Seasons changed. And with each passing week, Sarah felt lighter, stronger, and more rooted in the life she was creating. She and Noah developed little traditions, a Friday movie night with popcorn and PJs, Saturday walks to the farmer's market, and Sunday night story writing sessions where they made up adventures about a superhero mom and her brave son. One night, as Sarah tucked Noah into bed, he looked up at her with sleepy eyes and whispered, "You're the best part of my life." Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes. "You're mine too, sweetheart," she whispered back, kissing his forehead. It wasn't a perfect life. It wasn't easy. But it was real. It was theirs. And more importantly, it was filled with the kind of love and respect Sarah had once believed she had to earn. Now, she knew better. She didn't need to shrink herself to fit into a version of family that didn't accept her. She didn't need to wait for approval or permission to feel proud of the life she was living. She had already proven, to herself and to her son, that strength wasn't about shouting the loudest or being surrounded by applause. It was about standing tall, walking away from what hurt, and choosing, every single day, to build something better. That wedding, once a memory of humiliation, had become the turning point in her story. The beginning, not of heartbreak, but of transformation. And Sarah never looked back.